Press Control to crouch.
The Crouch Peak Podcast.
So Complexity are preparing for a pretty important 3-week stint to round out February. I briefly touched up on it on Twitter, but figured it is a little bit more important than simply a tweet. So I figured I would dive a little bit deeper into it, just because this is a group of young individuals who kind of quickly got swept up into this Complexity banner. Obviously, the 5 talent being familiar with one another, not necessarily playing with each other, but being familiar with one another in the scene. Just of course, being 5 upcoming NA talent, and now they are all together. They joined Complexity back on the 18th of January, so they are getting ready to cross their first month together, and so kind of entering this second month in about a week or two, they will already be in the thick of this extremely important event stint that I mentioned and that we will be diving into today. So a pretty rare predicament as far as a young group of kids playing in a pretty important string of events while still trying to identify themselves, get the ground laid out, the foundation laid out, and just kind of trying to figure out what the formula is for success. So pretty unique times. And I think if we get a good string of events here and we see a Complexity 6, 7, 8 months from now that is just lights out and they seem to have downloaded everything and got it all digested, I think we can look back on February, potentially, assuming they do well here. And I think that will be a big launching pad for that success. So I wanted to go deeper into that. Like I said, I don't think a simple tweet did it justice. So I'm just going to get a little bit heavier into those details here for this episode. So as I mentioned, the acquisition by Complexity of these 5 individuals was official last January, about the 18th. The next day they're at FunSpark Ulti. 2 weeks later they're at Blast. So they have struggled to win games, but they have offered enough in my perspective, and I feel like others as well. They have left us plenty to feel excited about just through these losses, even though that they only have currently 1 map win. They have given us enough in the short stint of time to have individuals excited, including myself. In the last podcast episode I did, when I did discuss the 3 North American teams' performance at the Blast group play, I did note certain positives that Complexity was able to pull, such as I really appreciated how consistent they were as far as trying to play on Nuke. They did give Big and G2 a run for their money on several occasions. Made G2 sweat there a little bit, certainly. And, the execution wasn't perfect. The ideas were there. And they made these higher echelon teams that are considered in certain capacities to be in different tiers. They, in some instances, made G2 and Big play Complexity's game. I noted a few times in the previous episode that they were making these oppositions get into kind of dogfights, real nasty, puggy battles that favor Complexity usually. So I was really impressed with how TC, which is the coach of Complexity, had the crew as well prepared as they were, especially when you consider how small that window of time was. So, a 1-day turnaround turned into an 8, 9, 10-day turnaround. TC and company were as well prepared as I thought they could have been. So, of course, the situation is not ideal. They are being kind of forced to learn on the fly, kind of figure out what kind of team they want to be in the middle of these events. But that's going to happen sometimes. Not every situation is ideal. And if you look across the greater scope of global Counter-Strike, there are a few teams actually that are in the same boat as them. So especially with a young team like this, you have to learn to take the licks as they come and make sure that they are learning from the wins and especially the losses. Being able to learn through the punishment and being able to kind of deal with the negativity throughout this journey will, in a lot of capacities, make this team stronger, especially under this complexity banner. The lineup just has, higher expectations, more eyes on them, and the flip side of that is you have more resources to become the prospect that we hope they can be. So I'm excited to see what they can do in this trying time. So I'm kind of dancing around it. So I guess let's get deeper into it. What exactly am I talking about for those that are unfamiliar? Why is this 3-week stint so important? Well, we'll dig into that now. One of the pretty awesome things about this situation that they're in, assuming they are able to stay positive and, learn from this situation, they are going to be playing a pretty extensive variety of teams spanning different countries. So, and they're also playing in different formats. So they're going to get different looks from different teams. And they're going to really be in an opportunity to figure out who they are. They'll certainly be hard tested over the next 2 events, starting with tomorrow, actually, in the ESL Challengers. So what that new event is, I believe this is the first one of this rendition, this title. We have 2 groups of 4, and then those 4 teams duke it out for 2 playoff spots. So, for example, Complexity being in a group with Furia, Order of Australia, and Heat, who is formerly Double Pony, now signed to this organization, a French team if you're unfamiliar. So again, a variety of looks here of different kind of Counter-Strike that Complexity could potentially be facing and potentially be learning from. So this first matchup is a best of 1. Assuming Complexity wins this first match, the following matchup, which will advance them into the playoffs. I know I'm getting a step ahead, but I'm kind of working out the situation here. If they win that first map against Heat and then win their second match, we could see 2 best of 1s from Complexity, and then boom, they're in the playoffs. So if we're talking about pure success, there is a way where they go 2-0, 2 best of 1 straight into the playoffs. Alternatively, if they lose either of these best of 1s, they will be pitted in a best of 3 eliminator match. And then, of course, if you make it to the very final match, that's a best of 3. So any matchup in this event with playoff implications elimination implications is automatically attached to a best of 3 series. So beyond this initial group stage, assuming Complexity make it to the playoffs with one of the other 3 group teams, they will then be pitted in this 4-team playoff bracket with 2 of the victors from Group A, and those 4 teams being Virtus Pro, Dignitas, Movie Star Riders, and 9Z. So certainly this event is comprised mostly of teams that I believe Complexity has an opportunity of beating. If we want to have that conversation about VP, okay, then sure, on paper, when we look at the rankings, that's a tough win. We know how inconsistent Virtus Pro can be, and of course, we're throwing some NA bias in there. Any given Sunday, any team has a puncher's chance sort of thing. But if I am going to be a little realistic here, when I look at the entirety of this first event, I have solace in the current format, specifically because of the best of 3 eliminator. And that is because I do believe in Complexity's ability as far as their map pool is concerned. When you look back at the core 3, when they were at Extra Salt, that being Floppy, JT, Fang, that Extra Salt team had a pretty sound map pool. So when I'm thinking worst case scenario, let's say we do get some eliminator matches here in this initial group stage between Complexity. Let's say they drop the best of 1 against Heat, right? I feel confident in their ability to beat Order, to beat Furia, and let's say they get matched up with Heat again in a best of 3. I am genuinely confident in their ability to at least get out of the playoffs. When I look at the broader picture of this first event, worst case scenario, nothing less than playoffs. I think not making playoffs here would be rather disappointing. I know that the rewards here at this event may not be too significant. I believe it's $50,000 and a spot at the 16th season of the EPL conference. So especially when comparing it to Katowice, which is, immediately after this event, maybe it does pale in comparison, but every event is important. This experience is going to be majorly important. And then that trio coming off of the previous EPL conference victory, I'm sure the bragging rights of winning back-to-back would be massive. So getting off on the right foot as we prepare to close out this month for Complexity, getting off on a victory here as they then turn immediately around in the Katowice play-ins 24 hours later, I think that will set the tone for what could be a stellar 21-day stint and moving forward an amazing, entire year under the Complexity banner. So getting off on the right foot is so, so important. And all of that starts tomorrow with that best of one against Heat. So assuming Complexity are able to figure themselves out in some capacity, let's just go, pure NA copium mode here. Assuming they do claim first place, which again, I do reserve confidence in their ability to do so. Virtus Pro might be problematic in the playoffs. And it's totally possible that I'm overlooking any of the three teams in the current group that they're in. I'm not going to dispute that possibility. But a good performance there piggybacks into the Katowice play-in, and this is the deep water. This is where the big boys play. This is going to be the toughest competition in all of this year for this Complexity lineup. When you look at its current schedule that's laid out for the team, they are slated to go through the Blast events that they're currently registered for and qualified for. And then, of course, there's Pro League. So when you compare Pro League, Blast, and then Katowice, historically one of the most important tournaments in all of Counter-Strike, year in and year out since the dawn of its existence. This is going to be so, so important for Complexity. And this is the header for why this month is so important. If they're able to rip off a solid play-in and make it to Katowice, even before we discuss how well they play at Katowice, let's say they go to Katowice itself, get murdered, okay? But coming off of an ESL Challenger victory, second place, third place showing, come into the play-ins and qualify, that stint would be so massive for this young team while they're still trying to figure themselves out. I mean, they've only played like 10 maps together under this banner. No matter what you want to say, it's not fleshed out. They do need some time to figure it out in its entirety. And seeing positive results here would give me so much hope, so much optimism. And I know what it would do for their progression. It would accelerate them tenfold minimum. Coming here, you see that they're in a best of one against Big, who they played at Blast. So there's some familiarity there. Let's say they rip off a win there. Best of three against winner of Astralis MIBR. A very beatable Astralis and an MIBR team that did claim victory over Complexity, but I am confident as well in their ability to reclaim that revenge. So again, maybe some copium involved here. The Astralis one could be a stretch just because Astralis, me personally, I know a lot of people are really ready to rip on Astralis right now, but they always seem to regain their understanding of Counter-Strike whenever it comes to North America. So this one will be... I'm going to be watching this one very, very closely. Of course, I watch all of North American Counter-Strike very closely, but I just can't stress this enough how potentially enormous this could be for their growth. And I'm sure they know this. And of course, I don't want to apply unnecessary pressure. Theoretically, I wouldn't want to, make this feel like it's like a do or die situation, anything like that, because it's not. They're very young individually. They're very young under this banner. I just think when you look at the schedule moving forward, how packed it's going to be, and everything else that comes with the intense schedule of being a professional CS player, getting what you can out of each moment is so important. So this may in fact be the biggest pocket of experience that they could garner throughout the rest of this year. So of course, on the flip side of that, they could not make it to playoffs at ESL Challenger, lose to Big, and then lose in the lower bracket and then be out. And then everything I've discussed the last 15 minutes was irrelevant, moot point, nonsensical. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see a really strong Complexity team come out, tear it up at ESL Challenger, and come into Katowice play-in and make a strong showing at bare minimum, and ideally make it to Katowice. So how are they going to get that done? Because I'm just saying a lot of storybook things, a lot of optimistic things, but how does it get done? What are the things that need to be patched up, need to be strong within the systems to accomplish those things? Well, first and foremost, I personally would like to see more Nuke. I liked how adamant they were about playing it in Blast, and I want to see more of it. Going back to when I said they were making G2 and Big fight their fights, get into their game, play at their tempo, made them sweat a little bit, that was on Nuke. I would also like to see a little bit of Inferno. They were pretty strong, they being the core of Extrasalt, pretty strong Inferno team as well. So maybe we would like to see a little bit of that get shown out at these events. Junior needs to get going without a doubt. He's currently performing nearly at bottom of the barrel across the team. He is performing better than JT. Of course, JT is the in-game leader, and Junior being the AWPer, somebody who needs to be constantly finding impact, especially in the current meta. Your AWPer needs to be your number one, maybe your number two guy, unless you have like a perennial rifler on your team, which arguably they may with Floppy, which kind of bridges into the next step. This two-headed rifle duo of Floppy and Grim, they kind of need to figure that out as well. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes talk, a lot of conversation before Grim joined Liquid. Grim is a superstar. Obviously, it's well documented that did not pan out at Liquid because of circumstances out of his control, between the turmoil, being forced into positions he's not organic to, et cetera, et cetera. We need to find out, is his ceiling diminished in some capacities? What does the newest rendition of Grim maxed out look like? And how does it compare with Floppy? So we need to find out who the number two is, because without a doubt, Floppy is the guy. Junior needs to be the number one or two in terms of general impact. But then we need to find out who's going to be the number two rifler, like who's going to offer that impact that Floppy needs if it's not going so smoothly for him. Will it be Grim? Will it be Fang? We've had, again, the conversations about Grim being a star. Fang has received a lot of praise as well, and he has a lot of high hopes on an individual level. So, I mean, we could go on and on about how every single one of these players needs to figure themselves out, and that's not what I'm trying to get into. But it is really important that we do get Junior fleshed out as the primary AWPer, and then we get figured out who is going to be the electronic to Floppy simple, because that's not totally defined yet. We haven't figured out who's going to be that guy to step up, because as it stands right now, unless something drastically changes, Floppy is the guy in Complexity, and he is the guy in North America. I've discussed it previously on other episodes. Gives me very much the same vibes that Stewie did on his come up. Has that same kind of aura to him. I've never been shy about my praise for Floppy, and I'm confident that he's going to get his no matter what. But in order to maximize the potential success of this team, we need to figure Grim and Fang out, Grim and or Fang, and then Junior needs to really step it up. As far as tactics and strategy is concerned, I've already mentioned it. TC and JT have this team pretty well oiled as far as thoughts. They just need to figure out the execution, and that will come with reps. So, yeah, and I'd like to see a little bit more from the map pool. I know I'm asking like 1,000 things, obviously, but because of such limited reps we've seen from these guys, again, they've only played 9 maps. We haven't gotten a whole lot of variety. So far, we've seen Nuke the most out of the 9 times with 4. They've only won on Vertigo over Gambit. But besides Nuke, we're really only getting just little flashes of everything else. Ancient twice, Dust, Inferno, Vertigo once. So again, only 9 maps. But I would like to see them throughout these next 2 events as far as map pool is concerned. If it is suitable for them to prioritize Nuke, then sure. But I would like to see some Inferno in there and either Ancient or Vertigo, whichever is a preference to them. And of course, we can break this down in a variety of ways, right? We can talk about map pool, tactics, coaching, all that good stuff. Fundamentally, especially we're talking about North American Counter-Strike, these boys are going to have to come in confident and inform. Whatever they need to do that first and foremost, that needs to get done. These boys are filled to the brim with talent. There's no disputing that. If we want to just peel it back and make it simpler, before we get to any of that other stuff I talked about, these guys need to be sharp mechanically, and they need to be unafraid, which we did see that second half. We saw the unafraidness. We saw that at Blast. Now we just need to see that refined form, the refined mechanics, and I want to see the version of complexity that I have idealized in my brain. Whether that is going to happen in the foreseeable future, I cannot confirm that. But what I do know is if that's going to happen, we need a good stint here. We need a good run here. We need more growth from what we saw from Blast at the bare minimum. And we need a playoff spot at Challengers. Just need to see something really excitable over the next 2 weeks. So no pressure, right, guys? So what do you guys think? Let me know. It's going to be a fun couple of weeks. So yeah, hit me up on Twitter at Lucas at RBM. Follow the podcast at Crouch_Peak. And yeah, just keep up your continued support, guys. Always appreciate it. Definitely the reason why I keep doing this is because of you guys constantly tuning in, reading the articles, the whole kit and caboodle. So thanks as always. That's it for me today. And let's go complexity. And I'll see you guys at the next one.
Press Control to crouch.
The Crouch Peak Podcast.